Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to Live with David Hester. And today we have with us the founder of the Living Foods Institute in Atlanta. And we will be talking to Brenda Cobb. And, she's got an amazing testimony because she has overcome the early stages of breast cancer and cervical cancer, and she didn't use drugs or surgery or any of the conventional medical practices. It was something as simple as a raw food diet. If you have any questions that you would like to ask us today, please call in at 1-347-677-1158. Brenda, are you with us?
Yes, I am, David. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
I'm glad that you had the time to to be on my program.
Oh, well, thanks again for inviting me. It's my pleasure.
There it is. Now, we have a caller already, and I'm just going to go ahead and let them on the line, okay?
Wonderful.
Hello, and welcome to the program. Okay. They hung up. Well, you're welcome to call back in anytime during the show. So, Brenda, tell us your story. Cancer and overcome it with green juices?
Well, that was a little bit of it. Actually, David, back in February of 1999, I was diagnosed with both breast and cervical cancer. And the doctor did want me to do a mastectomy and a hysterectomy and chemotherapy and radiation. I chose not to go that route. I had family and friends that had tried that route, and it did not really work out well for some of them. And I decided that I was going to look for a way to really help my body heal. I didn't want to put more toxins in my body because as I started reading and investigating, I came to realize that toxins can be a part of why we develop an illness. So I told my doctor no thank you to the surgery and the chemo and the radiation. He was not particularly happy about my decision, but I did let him know when he told me that I didn't have a choice, that I had to do what he said. I did let him know pretty quickly that I felt that as a grown woman I did have a choice. I had free will. God gives us free will. We can make our own decisions about what we're going to do, and where my body is concerned, that it would be really my decision. So on my journey, I set out and began learning as much as I could. I found out about a woman by the name of Dr. Ann Wigmore, who, when she was alive, had helped people who had had very serious illnesses, all types of illnesses, including cancer, some of them with very far advanced, even fourth stage and metastasized cancers. And I read a book that a lady wrote about how she conquered cancer. And she talked about, her name was Edie Mae, and she wrote a book called How I Conquered Cancer Naturally. And she talked about her story and how she had had breast cancer and surgery and chemo and radiation, and it kept coming back, and they kept doing more surgeries and chemo and radiation until the third time it happened to her, and then the doctors said there's nothing else we can do and told her that she only had a very short time left to live. And she wrote a book about her journey and how she found out about the living foods and Dr. Ann Wigmore and got on that program and how she completely healed. And she had many testimonies in her book about it and from other people that had healed with it. As I began to read it, it was just one books that made sense to me. It was foreign to me. I had never heard of the concept of being able to eat raw and living food, did not know the difference in raw and living foods even at that time. And it was strange to be thinking about a lot of the things that she talked about doing in her book. But I thought, something, if it can work for her, it can work for me. And God was really speaking to me through her book. And I followed that path, even though some friends and family did not agree with it and were worried about me. And scared that if I didn't go the traditional mainstream allopathic medical way and do surgery and chemo and radiation, they were afraid that I would die. And I just kept reminding them that, no, that was the reason I wasn't doing those things, because I didn't want to die and make myself worse, and that I kept reminding them that God told me to stay on this path and I was going to do it, and that I really knew that it was going to work for me. And it included a lot of things. Not only did it include the foods, but it included, mental thinking the right way, and faith and beliefs, and really believing in it. It included emotional healing and forgiveness work, and it included cleansing and detoxing my body, and then, of course, it included eating really good foods, optimum nutritional foods that could help me. So what happened was that within 6 months, I was cancer-free, and that was an amazing day for my doctor, because also in that process I had healed a lot of other things that I had been plagued with, like arthritis and migraine headaches and psoriasis and eczema and problems with my skin. And I had depression, and I had obesity, and I had acid reflux and indigestion and heartburn, and I had allergies. And actually, when I start talking about it now, I think, well, I really was a wreck. I'm not exactly sure how I was making it through, but what I did, David, was what I think the average person did. If I had a headache, I just took a pill for it, and, if something else was going on, if I had arthritic pain, then I took something for that pain, and really oblivious to the fact that keeping on putting drugs in my body was actually not helping anything but just masking the problems more. And it was fantastic when all those things healed along with healing the cancer. So it really changed my life in every way. One of the most powerful things for me, I thought, that gave me the most relief was when that acid reflux, indigestion, and heartburn went away. And that did not take me but about 10 days on the program. And I had been so plagued with it that I took all those acid reflux medications that you could imagine, and I kept them at home and in the car and in my purse and at work, and so that I would never be without them. If I was going to eat, I had to make sure I was taking this pill or that pill to try to counteract it. I even had it so bad that I couldn't lie down flat to sleep at night because it burned and it hurt so bad. I had to sit or try to sleep propped up. And with only just a few days, that completely went away, and I think that was almost as exciting for me as healing the cancer was, because it made me feel so much better. And now the rest is history.
That's amazing.
It is amazing, isn't it, when you think about it? It really, when I go back and think, because that was in 1999, and, as a result of that, God really revealed to me that I should share the information with other people. And that's kind of how it all started. And I began sharing it, and other people decided they would try it for themselves, and then many people tried it, and on. And it's been such a wonderful thing to see people that sometimes have been given no hope at all for their bodies to be able to do what God created them to do, which is to heal themselves. I really believe that with all that I have to believe. God created the body to heal itself. I believe the body knows how to heal itself. And what we've got to do is learn what to give the body so the body can do its job. And then it will stay in good health for us. And that's, I think, what all of us ultimately would like to have, really good health, so we can enjoy our lives and really do the mission that we're here, that God has in store for us to do.
So what were the steps that you took? You said that you made some dietary changes. You focused on cleansing and detox. What steps did you take that you believe reversed all of these ailments that you were having, including cancer?
Well, one of the things was the nutrition. So the diet did play a big part of it. The whole program of what I did and what I believe in that still works so well was changing from eating all the cooked food. I didn't realize that cooked food was dead. I had been eating cooked food all my life, as most of us do, I had the standard American diet like I believe the majority of people out there do. You know, I ate every animal known to man, and I ate them the way we like to eat them in the South. I ate them all fried, you know. And I ate dairy products, you know, cheese, and I drank a lot of milk, and I ate ice cream, and I enjoyed all of those things as well. I ate a lot of cooked vegetables, but the way we did them, you know, in the South is if we were going to have some turnip greens or collard greens, we would cook them with something called fatback or streak of lean that would have, you know, something from pork that would have the pork in there to supposedly give it the flavor. And we believe that the longer that you cooked it, the better it tasted. So sometimes a pot of greens would go on in the morning, and it wouldn't be unusual for them to cook several hours. And macaroni and cheese and biscuits and every kind of dessert. I will have to say that my mama and my aunts are some of the best cooks you can imagine, and they made the greatest food in the world, and we would always have family reunions, and it's kind of comical when I think about it now because, you know, we wouldn't have just, say, at Thanksgiving or at Christmas time we'd get together for a family reunion. We wouldn't just have, say, one kind of meat. There would usually be turkey and fried chicken and maybe roast beef and a pork roast there and, you know, who knows what else. I mean, we might have shrimp and oysters and all kinds of seafood and then macaroni and cheese and dressing and gravy and rice to go with it and a yam souffle, and then we'd have all kinds of desserts. We might have a chocolate cake and a lemon meringue pie and a German chocolate cake, and we might have a quizzy cake, which had about 13 or 14 different layers with all this caramel icing. I mean, all this delicious food. And we just ate and ate and ate, and until, you know, you have so much, David, all you can do is just go lay down and take a nap because your body is working so hard to digest the food. You know, we'd say, oh, I'm so full, I'm not going to eat another thing today. I don't think I'll ever eat again. I'm so full, I'm about to pop. And then go take a nap. And the first thing we thought of when we got up is those leftovers that were on the stove. We'd be back in there eating again. And over time, you know, all of that food, you know, really contributed to things for me like obesity. And I didn't know it then, but obesity contributes to one of the leading causes actually for people developing cancer in many cases is obesity. It's been linked with that, and we know obesity is linked with high blood pressure and high cholesterol and diabetes, and some of those ran in my family as well. And what I realized and came to learn is all that cooked food, besides the animal products being full of antibiotics and hormones that are not good for the body, and then the cooked food was dead because the living enzymes are killed when we cook our food, and we need enzymes in order to really function on every level. We can't breathe or blink our eyes, or a person could not conceive and have a baby if they didn't have enzymes in their body, because the enzymes are the catalysts that make everything work properly in the body. And that was the biggest thing for me, changing from eating cooked food to eating it raw, and the living, which is the sprouted foods. I really had never eaten sprouted foods or even thought about eating anything sprouted, like sunflower sprouts, broccoli sprouts, buckwheat sprouts, clover sprouts, mung bean sprouts, lentil sprouts. Didn't know how easy it was really to sprout or why to eat them. But what I learned on this lifestyle is that raw foods are full of enzymes and full of vitamins and minerals. But living foods that are sprouted and growing when we eat them actually have anywhere from 100 up to 100,000 times more enzymes than even raw food, and even more rich and dense in vitamins and minerals. So when we add living foods along with the raw foods, we really have some supercharged nutrition, and the body then to heal and to cleanse and to get nourished and rebuild on a cellular level. So I changed and began eating a lot of raw vegetables and fruits. Now, at that time, I didn't even realize that really eating fruit was not so good. I began learning that as I investigated more, because with cancer, if you eat fruit, the sugar can feed the cancer. And also with cancer, most people have something called candida yeast, which is a fungus, an overgrowth. You'll see people sometimes say they have a fungus on their toenails, or a fingernail fungus, or athlete's foot comes from a fungus, or jock itch, that comes from a fungus. And this is a yeast overgrowth. Well, yeast feeds cancer too, and sugar feeds yeast. So every time I would eat something with sugar, it would feed the problem. So I learned even more to fine-tune it into particular foods that would help me. And there are 4 main foods I talk about in my Living Foods Lifestyle book that are what I call the boot camp healing foods. And I use them.
I'm going to stop you right there for just a second. We have a caller, and remember the four main foods.
All right.
Hello, welcome to the show. Okay, feel free to call back in. Brenda, you there?
I am.
That's crazy. This person's been very patient and waited on the line. And anyways, you said 4 main foods.
4 main foods, what I call the boot camp healing foods, and here's what they are. First, wheatgrass juice. Now, wheatgrass juice is the pure chlorophyll green juice that comes from the blade of wheatgrass. Now, it is not the wheat itself, because we do not use any wheat or gluten at all in our program, and we do not recommend that people use wheat and gluten, and especially if people have celiac disease, they cannot eat wheat and those types of products. And people get a little confused sometimes, thinking that wheatgrass juice is wheat, but it isn't. And wheatgrass juice actually will heal celiac disease and the allergies to wheat. What it is, and it's easy to grow, so we just can grow it, or you can buy it in your health food stores, and you want to get it fresh. You can find it frozen, but that's not going to do the job. You can find it powdered. That's not going to do the job either. You need it fresh, and it's simple, easy, and very inexpensive for you to grow in your own kitchen. The Living Foods book, Lifestyle book, I have directions on how to do it. And you juice it with a special juicer that will juice wheatgrass. And I began by drinking 1 ounce of wheatgrass juice, and I worked up to drinking more. In fact, you can work it up, but you need to do it slowly, because wheatgrass juice is really a strong cleanser. It will detox the body. And if you drink too much at one time, it actually can make you detox and feel pretty sick. And I don't want you to give up in doing something good for yourself, because people will drink it and they'll go, I'm allergic to it. I got sick. I got nauseated. I got a headache. I said, no, you're not allergic. What it's doing is it's pulling those toxins out, and it just makes you feel bad. And so if you go a little bit slower, you can ease into it and still get really good results. I also use wheatgrass juice besides drinking it. I use it to implant in my colon, because when I read some of the books by Dr. Ann Wigmore, like the wheatgrass book, I learned that by implanting it in the colon, you actually even get more healing results than just by drinking it. So I learned from her book how to do an enema. I didn't want to do it. I'll tell you, when I learned that I was supposed to do that to help myself heal, I put my hands over my ears, David, and I said, now that's just more information than I care to know and need to know, and I'm not going to do it. I was really stubborn. I was like, now I'm going to do a lot of things, and I might change what I eat, but I am not going to do that. So I was one of those people who was like, I don't want to do that. That's just nasty, okay? But as I read more, I realized, wait a minute, if I'm going to heal, everything that I am reading is telling me that I need to do all this. So I finally gave in and let my ego get out of the way. I learned how to do an enema and then how to do a wheatgrass implant, and I started by implanting 2 ounces of wheatgrass after I did an enema, and I would do it every day. So I was really on a very, very strong, program. I really stuck to it. Once I decide I make my mind up I'm going to do something, then I really got in there and did it. The next food I use of those 4 is something called energy soup. Now, that's a blended recipe, and it really is like a smoothie. You can make it really thick and eat it with a spoon. You can make it a little thinner and drink it like a smoothie. And that is something you put in a high-speed blender, something maybe like a Vitamix is what I use. And you put dark green leafy vegetables like kale, mixed baby greens, mustard green, collard greens, dandelion greens. The dark greens are really good. I put in sprouts, so I had a half cup of sprouted mung bean and a half cup of sprouted lentils. I had a big double handful of sunflower sprouts and a double handful of buckwheat lettuce sprouts, half of an avocado, a tablespoon of sea vegetables like dulse or powdered kelp or wakame seaweed. There's several different ones that have really a lot of really good minerals in them. I put a half of an apple and some filtered water and then blended it up into the smoothie, and I drank that. And the reason that's so good is it's a powerhouse of nutrition. It's got the good kind of protein, the clean-burning fuel, because those mung beans and lentils and those sprouts actually have much more protein than any animal products have. Most meat and fish and chicken and all that maybe has between 21 and 23% protein, whereas a mung bean sprout for the same amount has about 37% protein. And by the way, wheatgrass juice we just talked about has about 47% protein. And so that was mixed up, and I drank it, and I was able to digest it because it's blended. So because it's blended, the body doesn't have to work as hard to digest it, and we really recommend that for people who are ill because the body requires so much energy to digest food, and we want the energy to go to healing the body. So the more blended foods that make it easy on the digestion, we feel the better it is for the healing. And that energy soup can really do it. It has a lot of good fiber in there, too, and fiber can help to cleanse the body and pull a lot of toxins out. And then the third food that I used was something called veggie kraut, like a sauerkraut. It's a fermented kraut. There's just 3 ingredients, and by the way, all these recipes are in my Living Foods Lifestyle book, and they're really easy to make. But the veggie kraut only has 3 ingredients. It has cabbage. You can use red or green cabbage. It has juniper berries, and all this needs to be organic because we don't want to get the chemicals from the fertilizers and the pesticides in our body because that causes disease too. So we go organic. And we just grind up those juniper berries in that Vitamix or high-speed blender and make a little, like a juniper powder out of it. And then we put a layer of chopped up cabbage and a sprinkle about a tablespoon of juniper berries and about a tablespoon of powdered kelp. And you can even chop up a little bit of wakame seaweed vegetable and put in there. And you keep layering that until you get a full pot or jar of it. And you leave it out on the counter, and you let it ferment. And you can ferment it anywhere from 3 up to about 7 days. And then it's ready to eat. Then you put it in the refrigerator, pack it in glass jars, and it'll keep in there actually several months. And then that has good probiotics in it for your good colon health. And probiotics like that help to get rid of things like the candida and the fungus and the mold and the yeast. And it also has living enzymes, and we know we need the enzymes for everything we're doing in the body. It's a blood builder. It's a detoxifier, and it's really high in minerals because of all the sea vegetables. So that's the third food. And then the fourth food I used was something called Rejuvelac. And Rejuvelac is a beverage. It can be made in several different ways. It can be made by using cabbage. It can be made by using sprouted seeds or grain. You don't, again, eat the grain, but you could sprout something called a soft wheat berry. You could sprout a rye berry. There's 2 examples. And then you sprout and you add water to it and you leave it out on the counter for a couple of days and you let that ferment and you drink that beverage. And you're getting, again, the probiotics. And in that particular beverage, you're getting 10 times more vitamin C as one of the vitamins than you do in orange juice. So 1 glass of orange juice or 1 glass of Rejuvelac gives you the same vitamin C as 10 glasses of orange juice. But it also gives you a lot of the vitamin E, which is your youthing vitamin. And, even if we're not ill, we want to look young and feel young, and everybody's into slowing and reversing aging, and this whole protocol is great for that. A lot of people do it just for that. They're not ill at all. They want to stay healthy and well and vibrant. And then the other thing I added to those 4 main foods were some green juices and occasionally some watermelon juice. The green juice I used was I would use kale and cucumber and celery and parsley together, and I would drink that. And then when I could get organic watermelon in the summertime, I would juice the watermelon, the red part. Also, I juice the rind, the white part, because that's where all the vitamins and minerals are. And so I wouldn't get too much sugar. I would even dilute that down with some water, and I would drink some of that during the summer months. But did you know something about watermelon that I didn't know? I thought this was really interesting. When you eat watermelon, you know how sweet that it tastes, but an apple actually has a lot more sugar than watermelon. But the reason that watermelon sometimes tastes so much sweeter to us is because it's mostly water and then the sugar. But the little bit of sugar in it, because it is mostly water, it tastes very sweet. But those green juices and the watermelon juice are very alkaline, and they help to bring back the alkalinity to the body. And that's what my goal was, to bring back alkalinity so that my body could heal. So very simple, just those few foods. Now, that's boring, just to eat just those foods all the time. So I did eat other raw and living foods and salads and so forth, and I talk about that and actually have over 50 recipes in the Living Foods Lifestyle book with a lot of different variations, because as human beings, we usually want a lot of variation, and good taste is important to us. And so I love to prepare food. I used to be what I would call a gourmet cook, and my friends and family always loved my food. And I was a little nervous about that, because I thought, well, gosh, if I am not going to be cooking all this food, what about my identity and who I am and what people think about me as being such a good cook? And then God revealed to me, well, you don't have to give up creating good recipes. You just create them now out of raw and living foods. And on my journey, I've created hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of recipes that are just as delicious and better than cooked food. And as people eat them, they enjoy them, and they really want to eat more of them. So if anybody out there is thinking that this is boring, or you're just going to be feeling like a rabbit because you're thinking you're only eating rabbit food, that really isn't true. You can have raw lasagna and raw pasta and crackers and desserts and all kinds of side dishes and entrees and drinks and everything on this lifestyle, and have a really rich, full diet.
Well, amen. And, wheatgrass is that's similar to barley grasses, is it not?
Well, barley grass is a grass like wheatgrass is. Yes, it is. But did you know that there have been some scientific research on the different types of grasses? And I want to tell you this story, which is kind of interesting, too. When Dr. Ann Wigmore used this for her own healing, because she had a lot of health issues herself, and that's how she got started on it, she actually prayed to God, and she talks about this in some of her books. She prayed for an answer, and she was from Lithuania. And she had been injured, and actually they wanted to amputate her legs, but her grandmother would not allow them to do that and began treating her with these living foods. And as she grew up, she was able to keep her legs, and she healed, and as she grew up, she really was so fascinated with how this had saved her life. She made it her mission to begin teaching it to people, and through research, she became involved with scientists and chemists and all kinds of people that wanted to know the scientific reasons as to why this was working. And they began doing various testing. And they found that wheatgrass juice was the most superior of all of the grasses that they tested. But she knew that, she said, even before that, because she said that God came to her in a dream. It was revealed to her that the juice of the grass was going to help to heal her. And so she didn't really know what kind of grass, so she planted several. She planted wheatgrass, ryegrass, spelt grass, barley grass. She planted the different ones and the different types of grasses. And then, she prayed about it, well, like, how am I supposed to, and which am I supposed to, and what am I supposed to do with it? And she said that, again, God came to her in a dream and said, your cats will tell you. So she had several cats. She said, your cats will tell you, and that she was just to put the grasses out that she had grown in her different trays, and that the cats would show her which one was the one. And so she says, so she does it. She grows the grass, she puts them out, she brings the cats into all the plots of grass, and that the cats go to every one of them, and they sniff them all, and every one of them go to the tray of wheatgrass, and they begin to eat. And she said that was how it was revealed to her that it was the wheatgrass that she needed. Isn't that a fascinating story?
Oh, it sure is. It sure is. The reason I asked about barley grass is because that's a popular supplement out, especially in heavily promoted with Hallelujah Acres and George Malcolmus, which is of course the kind of the Christian raw food hub.
I know Dr. Malcolmus and his wife Rhonda very well. In fact, Dr. Malcolmus and I sit on the board. It's an international raw and living foods leadership board, and there are 22 of us from around the world that are recognized as being the leaders in this raw and living foods. I guess we'll call it a movement or an idea, in helping people. So I know them very well. And barley grass is good. It really is. But again, remember now in my program, I have been following and continue to follow this original Ann Wigmore way. And that is the wheatgrass juice and that energy soup and veggie kraut and so forth. And many people I know have used the barley grass, and they say that it has been, good for them. And I do think that God has given us lots of different, things out there. He told us in Genesis 1:29 that we should be eating the fruit-bearing seed and the herbs. And, man kind of messed us up on that a little bit because man started taking the seeds out of everything. And when God said, eat the fruit-bearing seed, I thought, isn't it interesting? God already got so specific rather than just saying eat fruit, but talked about the fruit-bearing seed, that God already knew man was going to decide that he was smarter or could produce something better than what God could in Mother Nature, and began taking seeds out. So, now we've got seedless grapes and seedless watermelons and seedless lemons and seedless oranges and seedless tangerines and seedless cucumbers. It just goes on. And, the programming really is in the seeds for that food and how the body is able to recognize it, process it, digest it, and use it. And I think, the grasses, God is so good in the simplicity of it, in my opinion, too, because sometimes people want to make it difficult. And they think, well, it's got to be hard. It can't possibly be so easy. You can't just eat these simple foods and get well, can you? But, that's just like God to make it easy. It's like human beings to try to make it hard and make it complicated or think it's going to be harder than what it really is. So isn't it brilliant even to think about that in the simplest thing of a grass, a barley grass or a wheat grass, in a simple thing as a blade of grass, that all that healing power has been put in. It's just magnificent.
It sure is. It sure is. Now, you're an advocate of raw foods, and there's a whole lot of health information that's available today. Okay, I mean, we have a diet for everything. We have people advocating for all types of things, and one of the biggest debates is the raw versus the cooked food debate. And I haven't transitioned to a totally raw diet myself. I mean, I do have some cooked foods in my diet. However, I do eat predominantly raw foods. And so part of the hang-up with me is, okay, I don't mind giving up the processed foods. I don't mind giving up, in any of the genetically modified foods. Or organisms. I shouldn't even call them food anymore. I don't mind not doing those things. I don't even mind not eating meat. Okay, which would be another topic. But what's this debate with the do you need to have all your food raw, or are you supposed to cook your food, is forever sitting in my mind. My fiance is a biologist, and she says, well, what about the cell walls? There's, she says there's millions of cells in a little period on the page, and you have to be able to break down these cell walls. And she says there's no way that you're going to break down the cell walls in order to get to the nutrition unless, you're not doing that by juicing. You're not doing that by anything unless you're freezing the food or cooking it, to some level. And do you have any comments regarding that?
I do, David. Well, one of the things is that now when people come to our center and they actually study with us for 10 or 12 days, while they're there with us, we do all organic, raw, and living foods. We don't do anything cooked. However, we teach our students about how to add a certain percentage of cooked food when they go home, depending on what their health level is at that point. Because if someone is really ill, it may be good for them to really stay on that mostly raw and living, if not all raw and living, until they get well. But the majority of people are not going to go through their life never eating anything cooked again. And, in fact, I eat cooked food about 20%. So I eat about 80% raw and living foods and about 20% cooked vegan foods. So I believe that cooked foods, too, especially, let's say you're in a cold climate in the wintertime and you want a nice hot bowl of vegetable soup or miso broth with vegetables or something like that, or some nice steamed vegetables or a baked yam, that there's some of those types of things that can be added in with the raw and the living foods. Now, as far as breaking down the cell walls, I do know that there are different opinions about that, and sometimes you'll hear people say to you, well, you cannot get the nutrients out of broccoli unless you steam it, so it needs to be steamed first. But that's not what Johns Hopkins University found when they researched broccoli and broccoli sprouts. They found that broccoli sprouts actually can heal and reverse cancer and keep cancer from ever forming. And Johns Hopkins University and Medical Center is a very prestigious and well-known scientific research and medical facility. So there are, again, though, differences of opinions like there are, I believe, in most everything. For instance, I have a lot of men who have come to me that have had prostate cancer. And they have been told that they need the lycopene and they need it from the tomato, but that they should not eat the tomatoes raw because they can't get the lycopene, that you can only get it if you cook it. But that isn't correct, because lycopene is naturally occurring in the tomato, and it does not have to be cooked in order to get it. You know, let's go back and even think way, way back in our ancestry. Before there were microwaves, before there were crock pots, frying pans, before men even discovered fire, they were eating everything raw. And then just think about that once man and woman began to eat all these cooked foods, rich foods, because, you know, back in the older kings' days where you hear about a lot of the different diseases that people had developed, they were eating a lot of very, very rich and cooked food, and health began to go down, 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 and declining. And they weren't eating the processed, you know, additives, preservatives, chemicals, colors, dyes. A lot of times people think, well, that's what it's about. It's not about cooking. It's just about the fact that the foods we have today that are processed have all this in it. But actually, those cooked foods were causing many, many diseases long before additives and preservatives and chemicals and colors and dyes were used. In fact, if you'll go into the Bible and read the story of Daniel, there is a wonderful story in there. And, you know, it was interesting because God revealed to me as I was putting my center together, whenever he said, you got to open a center and teach this. And, you know, as a human, the first thing you think about, if you've never done something like that before, the first thing you think about when you're talking to God is, but I don't know what to do. I mean, I'm in a different business. What am I going to do? And God kept telling me, you don't need to worry about that. I'm going to show you every step of the way. And so God revealed to me, for instance, that people should come and they should do this for at least 10 days. And so I set up like a 10-day program from the very beginning. I didn't really think much about it other than when people said to me, well, why 10 days? I said, well, God said 10 days is what we needed, and that's what I do. But then one of my students came into one of my classes very early on, and she said she brought me this whole beautiful letter that she had written to me, thanking me because she had been very ill with cancer and she had healed. And she said, you know, I wanted to bring you something from the Bible because it says exactly what you're doing here, and it reminds me of you and your staff. You folks here are really living this scripture. And I remember when I read it, I remembered the story from the Bible as a young girl being raised in the Baptist church and having that story taught to me, but I had really forgotten about it. And it was the story when Daniel went, you know, and said that he was not going to defile himself with royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to, and he used the word to defile himself in that way. And so the official that was in charge of Daniel, you know, had some sympathy for him, but he told him, he said, look, I can't, I'm afraid because my lord, the king, has assigned what your food and your drink is supposed to be. And he's told me that you're supposed to have the very best of the best, the king's ransom in food, the richest of the food and the wine. And, you know, if he sees you looking worse than the other young men that are your age because you're eating this different food, then he'll have my head, you know, and they'll be off with my head. I've got to do what the king said. And then Daniel told the guard, he said, look, please test us for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and give us water to drink. And then you compare my appearance with that of all the young men who are eating the royal food and treat your servants, which is us, in accordance with what you see. So the guard agreed, okay, that he would test him for 10 days. And it says in the Bible that at the end of 10 days he looked healthier, better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine and that they were to drink, and instead they gave him vegetables. And then it says, and I love this, to Daniel God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. And at the end of time set by the king to bring Daniel in, the chief official presented him to Nebuchadnezzar, and the king talked with him, and he found none equal to Daniel. So Daniel entered the king's service, and in every matter of wisdom and understanding about whatever the king questioned Daniel, he found him 10 times better than all the magicians and the enchanters in the whole kingdom. And that comes from Daniel 1, 8 through 20. So, nothing happens by accident. God was leading this from the very beginning. So I understand, but they weren't cooking it then. And, even if you go back and read about the Essenes back in the Bible days and how the Essenes did not cook their food and how they ate their food raw. So I do know that today there are people like, again, biologists and scientists and so forth, and I certainly do not argue or judge anything that they're saying. I just know in my heart what is true for me and what many, many, many other thousands of people have seen to be true for them, and that is that all the nourishment that we need is coming from everything God gave us in Mother Nature without cooking it. Because God made it simple, He wouldn't have made it even complicated for us. Because back then in the garden, again, there were no microwaves or stoves. And you know what else there were? There were not pharmacies on every corner with people selling drugs. Even in great-great-granddaddy's day, what did they use if they got sick? They used herbs. What does it say in the Bible we should use in Genesis 1:29? It tells us use the herbs. I've given you everything for your food. I've given you the herbs and the fruit-bearing seed. So I go back to that, and I just, lovingly, when people mention these things to me, I lovingly listen. I do not try to judge or criticize their way of thinking, but I do stand up for what I believe, because I really believe that this is all provided by God, and that that's the way that God intended us to do it. I do eat some cooked food myself, as I said, from time to time, but I believe that really it is from these raw foods that we're getting all the nourishment, and that we don't have to cook anything, quite honestly, to get optimum. I also believe blending and breaking it down. A lot of people can't digest food, even the simplest of a sprout salad or cooked food, because their digestion is so compromised over years of abuse. And by blending, for instance, or eating these enzymatic-rich foods that have all the enzymes in them to help in the digestive process, that helps the body to be able to absorb the nutrients. And I've been tested for nutrients, too, by the way. There are ways that you can test to see how much nutrients and antioxidants and vitamins and minerals you actually are absorbing. And there are people out there today that take very expensive vitamins and minerals, and they think that they're getting a lot of good from them, but then when they get tested as to what their real absorption rate is, they'll see that it is very low, whereas my numbers are extremely high. And because, in fact, I know the first time that I had the test done, I remember the doctor that was testing was quite, blown away and kind of like, wow, look at this number. I don't think I've ever had anybody have a number this high. So, I think if you start testing more of my students and the people that are following this, I believe you're going to find it, because we're really getting so much of this absorbed at a cellular level that you can't get even by trying to take a vitamin or mineral product. And when I've talked to people who own porta potties, they tell me that when they clean porta potties at the end of big events, that they sometimes will find between 1 and 5 gallons of pills, a lot of them being vitamin pills, that are in those porta potties that are totally undigested. So I think a lot of the things that we might be taking, if we're trying to take supplements rather than getting it from our good nutrition, that we're not really absorbing it anyway. So if we are going to take supplements, which I'm not against taking supplements at all, in fact, I do take some supplements myself, but remember, it's supplements, so it's to supplement a good nutritional program. It doesn't take the place of it. So you can't just eat any old food you want and take a whole bunch of supplements and think that that's going to fix all the problems. So I am a real proponent of the raw and the living food because of that.
Amen. And we have a caller, so let's see what they have to say. Hello, and welcome to this program.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just have a question because I've been listening, and it's about cancer. You mentioned something, or Ms. Cobb mentioned something about fruit has the natural sugars and cancer feeding off of that. So if someone has cancer, should they just avoid fruit altogether until they're healed? And then I had another question. If the cancer is like metastasized to the bones, what can they eat to help strengthen the bones? I've heard that calcium supplements, really are not enough.
Those are great questions. What's your name?
Sheena.
Sheena. Great question. So as far as the fruit issue, if a person has cancer, yes, it is best not to eat the fruit during what we'll just call it a healing crisis, or the healing challenge we're going through. That doesn't mean you can never have fruit again, but you would not want to have fruit and be feeding that sugar to the body. But remember, there's other ways that you get sugar, too. People sometimes don't realize it. People that are eating cooked food like pasta and bread, for instance, that turns right into a sugar. So even though it's not like you're eating a candy bar or you're eating a piece of fruit with the sugar, you're still getting pure sugar from that. And same as if you're drinking alcohol, you're getting pure sugar from that, and that will feed the cancer. And it's going to be better, those foods that we talked about when you ask about what do I do if I have an issue with it being metastasized and it's in the bones. Those 4 foods I mentioned, the wheatgrass, the Rejuvelac, the veggie kraut, and the energy soup are going to be paramount for you. And did you know, in speaking about calcium, a lot of times when we talk about calcium, and I ask somebody this question, Sheena, I'll say, where do you think we get most of our calcium? What do you think most people will answer when I ask them that? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, milk or cheese.
Absolutely. They'll say milk, cheese, or dairy. But no, it does not. It is actually a cooked product, and it's an acid product that we're putting in the body. And when we put that acidic food in the body, any kind, not just dairy, but any cooked food is going to be acidic. What happens is the body, in its attempt to return alkalinity, it'll actually go into the bones, and it will leach calcium from the bones in the attempt to bring the body back to alkalinity. But the highest form of calcium, one of that you can find on the planet, it comes from dark green leafy vegetables. So these dark green leafy vegetables that go in, for instance, that energy soup recipe, are full of the kind of calcium that you need to strengthen and make your bones stronger. And the beauty of it is that can all easily be absorbed into your body. And another high form of calcium comes from a seed that is a sesame seed. Very high in calcium and also high in protein, by the way. But with the calcium, you can take those sesame seeds and ground them and make something called tahini. And tahini can be purchased in your health food stores if you don't want to grind it yourself. It is easy to grind, though. There's some juicers that juice wheatgrass juice that will also grind tahini seeds and other types of seeds. And you can use that tahini butter, and that will also bring a lot of calcium. But again, with nuts and seeds and a cancer patient, it's not really good to be eating a lot of that because they're too greasy and oily. And even the nuts are acidic, except the almond is a little bit more alkaline, but it still has acidity too. So the greens really are going to be the best, and that will help your bones. But the beauty also of this program is that it helps the whole body from the inside out. not just where the cancer is, but the bones, the liver, the kidneys, the brain, the colon, the pancreas, the thyroid, every organ and every gland. So your body might need special support in one area to really heal, and maybe you don't even realize it. People think, well, I've got a tumor. I've got a cancer tumor. How fast is that tumor going to dissolve and go away? Well, it's going to do it when the body has healed the most important things first. What if the liver needs to get healed first to even be able to dissolve the tumor? Because the liver is a filter, and the kidneys are a filter. So possibly the body needs to take that nutrition and heal the liver and the kidneys so that then it can do a better job of filtering, and therefore the tumor can be dissolved. Remember this. Sheena, the body was created by God to know how to heal itself, and it will do its job perfectly every time if we give it what it needs. So those 4 foods would be the best for that situation.
Thank you. And I have one last question. Is there a difference between broccoli sprouts and broccoli florets? Because you mentioned something about Johns Hopkins and the research they did on the broccoli sprouts. Is that
There is a difference.
What are they?
There's a difference. Okay, now the florets on the broccoli is going to be the head of broccoli after it is fully grown, okay? And you eat that. Now, that's good for you. If you're going to eat it, I'm going to recommend that you either blend it in some of your smoothies or chop it up really, really fine in your salads and really chew it well. Because if you don't chew it well, you're not going to get the goodness from it. So that's the broccoli itself. But a broccoli sprout is actually the seed that is used to grow the head of broccoli, but you eat it just when the tail has come out and made the sprout. So now you can go into the grocery stores and you can find broccoli sprouts growing, but you can grow them very inexpensively yourself. In fact, I have a little bag that I use, a little sprout bag that we can put the seeds in, and you just soak them overnight in water and then rinse them a couple of times a day, and they will sprout. And that is the living food. So the broccoli itself is not living because, remember, it's been cut from the stalk, and now you're going to eat it. So that's going to be your raw food. But the broccoli sprout is going to be growing the long tail in the sprout, and if you didn't eat them and someone planted those sprouts in the ground, the farmers that are raising the heads of broccoli, then it would eventually grow into a head of broccoli. But you want to eat it while it is a sprout.
Okay, and that the other thing you were talking about was called tahini or Tahiti?
Tahini.
Tahini.
Right. Tahini. Tahini. And it's nothing more than ground sesame seed. But if you go to your grocery store or health food store to buy it, be sure you look for the one that says raw tahini, because there's also a tahini made out of toasted sesame seeds. It has a different flavor, but now it would not be good because it would be acidic, and you would be not getting the same amount of calcium or anything from it because of it having been cooked.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for calling in.
All right. Well, we're down to the last minute of the program, okay? And what we're going to do is I'm just going to have you share your website address so that people can find you online, and then we will continue talking afterwards, and that will also be still in our program. It'll just be in the archives, but this is the end of the live show.
Okay, that sounds wonderful, David. Well, the email address, you can email me directly, and my email is Brenda, Brenda, at livingfoodsinstitute.com. Remember to put an S on foods, and institute is spelled out completely. And my website is livingfoodsinstitute.com. So you can go and access information. You can email me with questions, and you can call me, too. My toll-free number is 800-844-9876, and my number for Georgia residents is 404-524-4488. 888. And I hope you will, email or call. And any questions, I'm available to do consultations or just answer a few questions for you if you would like.
Well, I thank you so much for being on the program today. Like I said, we're going to continue going, so this will be like the bonus information.
Okay.
Now, and now we're into the bonus section. So the live program is over. I've really appreciated the show today, and it's even given me a lot of things to think about, because I have decided, as far as with my ministry, that I was going to try to take a real balanced approach to health. Okay, and to me, that balance was, I wasn't going to argue about the raw versus the cooked. I was just going to say eat a lot of raw foods, and I wasn't going to, debate about whether or not you ate meat. But please eat only free-range meats. Please eat only the meats that the Bible says that we're allowed to eat, according to Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14. And so my program was based on something similar to the Maker's Diet put out by Jordan Rubin.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that diet. Absolutely.
And so that's, he's had some wonderful results as well, and as have I in my practice. But the one thing that keeps coming home, because I have a lot of raw food advocates on my program, because I'm kind of teetering a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
With all of the information out there, see, I'm allowed. It's my program. I can say where I'm having troubles, right?
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're all in this together, David, and we all, we all really have our own struggles, and God reveals a little bit at the time, sometimes to us on our journey, and it is okay for us to change our minds too. We can think one way, and then maybe God reveals something else, and like, well, you know what? I think maybe I might be starting to think in a little bit different way now. So I appreciate that. Absolutely.
And I think it's really important for especially health ministers and people that are teaching health and fitness to be open and be honest. And you don't see a lot of that in the health world. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Is say, I've debated this, but one scripture on the meat topic that keeps coming to my mind is in the book of Hosea. Okay, now I believe we are allowed, according to the Torah, according to the Old Testament law, to eat meat. Okay, the thing is we're also given wisdom. The Bible says, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And so what's happening is the meat today is nothing like the meat was in the days of Scripture.
You're right about that. And even remember in the days of Scripture that the animals carried such even a sacred place, because remember how they used to use them as sacrifice. It was a totally different experience back then as what it is today, because, David, today we have industries that are farming and brutalizing animals, that are raising them that in horrible environments, and are brutally slaughtering them and feeding them the antibiotics and the hormones. But even with the free range and those that are not fed that, we have to look at the chemistry of the body, and scientific research shows this to be true. When a person eats meat, the body gives off uric acid, and uric acid really can play havoc with the body in many ways. Eating meat makes the body acidic overall as well. And these acids in the body, let's just talk about uric acid for a quick moment. can produce things like gout and arthritis and many problems that are affecting the bones and the joints and all of this. And a lot of pain comes from that, too. And when you go back into these kings' days and you read some of those stories, you'll hear about how the most wealthy of the kings had this, what was called then this royal disease called gout. And they've investigated that, and scientific research has shown it was because of the meat and all that they were eating. I get a lot of people coming to my center with gout, and when I talk to them, they're all the big and heavy meat eaters. And even people that are not eating a lot of it, but are eating some of it, are having gout now. And you know, there's an epidemic now of rheumatoid arthritis that is bigger than it has ever been before, which is related to, you know, even other things like Lyme disease, which will be a great topic for us to talk about someday too. But the meat creates the acidity. Now, here's the other thing that we found. Again, scientific research has proven this. There's some good books out there for people to read I'm going to recommend. Read Diet for a New America by John Robbins, and read The Food Revolution by John Robbins. And there's some good DVDs out there that really talk about what's happening to that food and what is happening with those animals, too. You know, there's the DVD Healing Cancer from Inside Out. There's that Mike Anderson produced, Mike Adams produced. There is the one that is called the Rave Diet, Eating the Rave Diet, that really explores it. Going even into Super Size Me, which was a mainstream movie that came out when the gentleman that produced it decided to eat the fast food for 30 days. He was in great health before. Actually, I believe it was his wife who was a vegan chef. And anyway, he was in great health, but he went on that 30 days of just eating that fast food, and what that did to him. So the meat does more than just the antibiotic and hormone. It clogs up, and you get infestations of worms and parasites. You know, a lot of people now out there are eating a lot of sushi, and even sometimes raw foodists are eating it and saying, well, it is raw. It's not cooked. So that would be better than eating cooked meat. If I'm going to eat an animal, let's say, let me eat the raw fish. But now what we're finding from that is that there's a huge epidemic of infestations of parasites. Now, this has been in Time and Newsweek and all over the news, and a lot of people are getting actually brain parasites now and infestations in their brain as well as in other parts of their body. So these worms and so forth that are coming from the food, and, you know, they come also from meat, and that meat doesn't digest. You notice sometimes, for instance, you can tell a lot about the health of a body from the elimination. And again, when you go way back, a little ways in history, even in Chinese culture or some of those, when you see the movies about the Dalai Lama and so forth, they'll talk about how they would actually take a look at the feces and the excrement to see, you know, what's going on. Is that person digesting their food? You know, is there a problem with worms or parasites or whatever? But, you know, we don't do that today. We sit on the toilet and we flush afterwards and we're off, and yet we really don't realize sometimes there are hundreds and hundreds of worms and parasites and so forth. They will begin coming out. I would like people to know that once you get on this program, they're going to leave the body, and that's a good thing because they can leach out so much of even your energy. I've had students come to the center that have actually released tapeworms that were over 12 feet long. In fact, I was just recently doing a lecture tour in New York City, and one of my students came in, and he was so proud to bring me his photographs. He said, "Did you see this big long worm that came out of me? Did they tell you about it, you know, from class and everything?" I said, "Well, you know, no." I said, "But that's typical. I mean, we do have, and we have seen a lot of worms." He said, "I took a picture, Brenda. Do you want to see it?" I said, "Sure, show me that long worm, you know." But anyway, these things, we don't want to think about them. I mean, you think about that, David, and it doesn't kind of give you the heebie-jeebies a little bit. It's like, ooh,
Sure does.
Are those long, creepy, crawly? I mean, could I have a 12-foot tapeworm in my body? But listen, do you know that those things can grow to over 30 feet? I mean, 12 feet for a tapeworm sometimes is not that big, okay? They wrap around, and there's liver flukes where people get these worms in their liver. They're worms that can get in the heart. Well, you even have heard animals get heartworms. They give animals heartworm pills to try to keep them from getting heartworms. So there's tapeworms, and there's roundworms, and there's ringworms, and there's just all these types of different parasites. You know, meat eaters produce these, and you know, when you start cleaning up your diet, here's something else that's interesting. If you would go on and just try it for 12 days, David, if you were able, say, for instance, to come to my center, and you were able to go through it completely for 12 days, even people who have been on what they have thought was a very clean diet, because I get people who have maybe been raw foodists for many years too, and they'll come in and they're amazed at this deep, you know, cleansing and these things that start letting go, because they store so deep many times, and if a person continues to eat the food they feed off, then they're going to multiply. And then, you know, they give off feces in the body themselves. Remember, they're eliminating. So you're getting all that stuff from those worms, too, and then they're leaching. Sometimes people say, Brenda, I'm hungry all the time. I eat all the time, and I'm always hungry. I said, you know, classic symptom of a tapeworm right there, where you just can't seem to get enough. I said, well, let me tell you one of the reasons. Those tapeworms can eat several hundred more times in their weight in food. So, I mean, they're leaching, literally, a lot of times it feels like they're leaching the life out of a person because they make you so tired. You know, it's like, oh, I'm so tired, I'm just dragging around all the time. Candida is a parasitic yeast. It's a parasite. So when people have this candida yeast in their bodies, same thing. They're tired, they've got brain fog. You can't really, when you go from the kitchen to the living room, but you don't remember what you went in the living room to do, when you're in the middle of a sentence and you forget what you're going to say, when you see people you know and you know their names, but you can't remember them for anything you can do, and you notice all of a sudden you're not thinking as clear, or it just seems that your thoughts are more muddled, or it's taking you longer to process information. Many, many, many people have this infestation of candida that has become systemic. It's in the blood, and therefore it is traveling to every organ in the body, and it loves to get in the brain, and it just feeds and feeds, and it makes everything from toenail fungus and, you know, fingernail fungus and the athlete's foot and jock itch and eczema and psoriasis and acne and rashes and itching and irritability and insomnia. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But when you get that out of the body, and it'll leave, when you give it a clean environment, when you begin putting in that pure chlorophyll, when you stop feeding it dairy and all meat products, and you literally starve it, it will not like the environment of that very clean, crisp, green feeling of all that food coming in, and they'll begin leaving. And you'll start seeing them in the toilet. I tell people, when you see them, I know you're probably going to scream out loud the first time, but that's okay. Scream, flush, run away, and say this: better out than in. Thank goodness they came out, because staying in the body, they really can do a lot of damage. I'm seeing so many more worms in people's organs now, where they'll call and they'll say, I've just was diagnosed, or my nephew was diagnosed, or my daughter was diagnosed, and they've got this huge parasite in their brain. I said, you know what? I'm getting more and more and more of this type of thing that is happening, and how it's feeding off the brain and becoming so big that actually when they're going in sometimes to operate, they're thinking it's a tumor, and they get in and find it is not a tumor at all. It's a parasite. So it's a little freaky, and a lot of us don't want to talk about it because, gosh, what's fun to talk about worms and parasites and enemas and cleaning out your colon and impacted fecal waste. People don't want to talk about that. You know, we've been told, you know, and made to believe a lot of things about our elimination. I mean, even when we were children and maybe we had to go real bad and we were told by our teacher or our parents or adults in charge, well, you can't go right now. You just have to hold it. You know, we're not going to stop to go now, or we don't have a break now, or you can go when we go to recess or whatever. And we start holding it in then. We don't just let it go. And with it, we hold in a lot of feelings, and it can be everything from frustration and anger to resentment, and all kinds of things can get held in that. And, you know, we haven't talked about any of the emotional components yet of healing, and we have spent quite a bit of time on the nutrition, but in my personal opinion, nutrition is the number 5 most important thing in healing. It is not number 1. And when I talk about that, I always like people to know in the order of most importance, first comes mental thinking. You can have a fantastic, pristine diet. If you're not thinking correctly, and people sabotage themselves by thinking in ways that make them worse rather than better, and they don't mean to do it. Sometimes they do it unconsciously because they've been doing it that way for so long that they don't know better, and they don't even think of there being anything wrong with it. So mental thinking is critical, key, number 1. Number 2 is emotional healing. You can change your diet all day. If you do not heal the emotional reason at the core of why you developed that specific disease, you'll never heal. You may get better from eating the foods. Most likely you will get better from eating the foods. You'll feel better, and, you know, you may begin to see some improvements. But you'll never get complete healing until you heal the emotional self. And that goes into healing all kinds of things like fear. You know, I personally am a Christian. Okay, so let's say I'm talking with someone who is a Christian, and that we're talking about I believe in the power of God through Jesus to heal anything, anytime, no matter how far advanced it may appear to be, no matter what anybody says, no matter what the doctors report when they tell people you're hopeless, terminal, incurable. In my mind's eye and in my heart, I believe that with Jesus Christ, through God, all healing is possible. And I see it happen all the time because we pray when people come in and, you know, we ask for healing, and people come and they heal by amazing miracles all the time, just like what you talked about with Jordan's book and how he's had all these miracles, you know, and people are eating this other way. Well, listen, I still say this is God healing. It isn't just food that of what we're eating. That's why it's not really like we want to even try to debate each other about, well, is it this way or that way? If it's working and God is healing through it, then beautiful, because God may have many things giving us many ways of helping us to heal, and this is just one of the beautiful ways that God has given us. So far be it from me to ever judge or criticize any way that God is working through whatever. Because when people tell me that, oh, well, this worked for me, I'm like, praise God for that. I'm so glad about that. But we've got to heal emotionally, and a part of that comes forgiveness, forgiving ourselves. A lot of times we are guilty about things, and we're worried about things, and we're just all worked up about regret or whatever. If I could go back, if only I could have done something different before. I wish I had a, woulda, shoulda, coulda. Oh, my gosh. And now we start making up our own stories in our mind, and it just goes on and on and on. So we've got to forgive ourselves, and we've got to let it go. Not just forgive it, but we've got to let it go. We've got to clear it out of the cells, and we've got to get it out of the DNA. We must do that. And we've got to forgive other people. That is paramount in healing. I mean, some people have carried resentments and anger in their heart for years. It tells us in the Bible, don't go to bed and be mad. You know, if you're mad at somebody, you know, at least get mad early enough in the day that you can go on and make up with them before you go to bed. Don't hold resentments and grudges. And these things keep people from healing, even when they change their diet, but they will not go forward from that to really go, because you know something, David, that is more difficult for most people than changing what they eat, healing the emotional self, because it can be painful. That emotional stuff starts coming up, and we've maybe hidden it for so many years or pushed it back so deep. It's something that we don't something happened, and maybe we don't even want to think about that anymore because, you know, we prayed to God for Him to just deliver us from it, and we've just gone on with our lives, but there's something that's still in there, and we really have not moved into that really what Colin Tippin calls radical forgiveness. You know, he wrote the book Radical Forgiveness, wonderful book about really forgiving, and I recommend that for anybody who wants to really go in deep to really forgive. And boy, will it open your eyes when you read it. And there's some things in there that can be quite shocking when you start really thinking about all of that and how we think about each other and what the consequences of not really truly forgiving. Because how many times have we heard somebody say, well, I can forgive them, but I can't ever forget it. Well, now that's when the mind starts thinking about it. And we say, well, I forgave him, but I just can't forget it. I can't forget it. And we keep playing it back over again in our mind, over and over. And that mental thinking and that emotional healing, and there it goes running rampant. So when you see people who have, say, diseases like diabetes, you'll see that there's really no sweetness or joy left in their life. You can kind of look at some of those emotional components. When you're looking at people that have developed cancer, like what I did, that there was actually grief or a deep secret that's just eating away at the self or carrying hatreds. And I will have to tell you, I did have hatreds and resentment that I was dealing with over my first husband and my divorce. And I carried that with me and actually didn't realize what I was doing to my own self. But what I was doing was I was creating breast and cervical cancer from me being so full of hatred and so mad at him. So, you know, the deep hurt, the long-standing resentment, the carrying hatreds, the feeling of what's the use. And now in my case, it went into the breast. And when it goes to the breast, it goes deeper emotionally to a refusal to nourish the self, putting everyone else first, over-mothering, over-protection, and overbearing attitudes. And I had all of that in my life, too. You know, I was born and raised in the South, and I really was taught to put other people first. You know, that's a really good thing. My whole upbringing in the church and everything was, you know, doing good for other people and making sacrifices for others. You know, you do, you know, to help them, even maybe you don't feel good or, you know, and I would not take care of myself, but I would be running around like a crazy person trying to take care of everybody else. And those types of things must be healed. So that's the number 2 reason, emotional. Number 3 is stress. So you see, still we haven't even talked about nutrition because it isn't the most important thing. Next is stress. We live in a world that has so much stress. There's no way to get away from stress. It's there. We're not going to be able to change that. But what we can do is we can change us. We can change ourselves. We can't change anybody else, but we can change ourselves because it's never what happens to a person that really makes any difference at all. It is their reaction to what happens. It's not what happens, but when the person reacts in anger, that anger stores in their own liver and makes them sick. So, you know, and again, when we go back into the Bible, it tells us not to have fear, for instance. But how many times have I talked to people that when I say, do you believe in God? Oh, yes, I believe in God. Do you believe in the power of God to heal? Yes, I believe that. Do you believe in prayer? Yes, I believe in the power of prayer. Do you believe that, with this, that you will be healed? Do you believe that God is working through this? Do you feel this is the right way for you to go? You feel it in your heart? Oh, yes, absolutely. And then the next thing out of their mouth, after they have professed how, yes, they do, the next thing is, Brenda, I'm so worried, though. What if this doesn't work? I said, well, honey, listen to what you just said. Already you're fearful. It says in the Bible, fear not. I'm with you. It is fear, actually, David, that kills people and makes them sick. Not the disease itself, but which comes from things like fear, but it's really that fear. So people will sabotage themselves, not meaning to. They want to heal, but then they get conflicting information. They'll go to the doctor. The doctor will be pressuring them to do something. They'll call. They're in tears with me. They're like, I don't want to do it. It doesn't feel right. I said, well, you have the right to choose. You can do what you want. Remember, yeah, but they say, and boy, by the time I get through listening to all the fear that, say, the doctor or a well-meaning friend or family member that loves them dearly, wants them to be with them, and doesn't want them to die. And maybe they find out, the person says, well, I'm going to go the natural way. I'm going to do this program, and I'm not going to do what the doctor says. Well-meaning relatives can get very concerned. You have to do what the doctor says. They will tell you, if you don't, oh, no, what might happen to you? And there it comes. So then people take pressure from others rather than really listening to God speak to them in their own inner voice and what really feels right for them. They'll get swayed because why? Fear. And fear is what holds people back. So we got to remember this, that stress happens, and it's our reaction to it that can either become a positive influence and help us to create the health and life we want, or it can become a negative influence, and that stress can physically make the body sick. Sometimes people get called hypochondriacs, or they have psychosomatic diseases where they say, well, we can't really find any reason why this person should have this or that, or why they hurt or whatever. It's all in their mind. Now think about that. Many doctors have diagnosed people just like that. It's all in their mind. Look how powerful the mind is. It isn't that that person isn't hurting, because that person is hurting. They are in physical pain. But the doctors can't see any physical reason why they should be. So they say, well, it's psychosomatic. They're a hypochondriac. It's all in their mind. And yet the body is exhibiting this. So remember, power of how we're thinking can actually produce symptoms and diseases. Emotional stuff held in actually drives it and fuels it and sends it to the part of the body. That's why there's a different emotion for a person who has brain cancer versus prostate versus breast versus liver versus uterine or ovarian or vaginal cancer, versus eye cancer versus liver or kidney. There is an emotional component, all unique, even to the specific organ of where that disease develops. We really must work on, heal, and release that from the cells. And then the next level we're now to, number 4, is toxicity. Eating good food is great, but if you do not cleanse and detox your body, all you're doing is putting good food on top of a bad situation. And that is why deep cleansing and pulling out heavy metals, lead, mercury, chemicals, chlorine, dioxin, additives, preservatives, chemicals, colors, dyes, processed food, the GMO foods that have been genetically changed because the cells of animals have been put into the vegetables or into the fruit. So now we have something that is almost like the Frankenfood or Frankenstein. It's not a real thing. We're putting it in the body, but our body isn't programmed to even be able to recognize it. What happens when we put in hybridized food and genetically modified food? The liver doesn't even know how to process it because the coding in it, like the seeds and the originality of how it was produced by God and Mother Nature to go into the body isn't able to even recognize it as real food. It doesn't know what to do. And that stuff spills over because the liver is not even able to process and detoxify it out. I mean, even things like soy burgers and boca burgers, and I'm not trying to cite out a particular type, but just a veggie burger in the health food stores, they have GMO, genetically modified foods in them. In Europe, they don't allow genetically modified foods because the Europeans really and truly care so much about their citizens that they don't want their citizens eating genetically modified foods. But in the USA, not only do we eat them and is it encouraged, but there are scientific projects that are developing more and more genetically modified and created foods than ever. Even the seeds are controlled now. You know, Monsanto's controlling all the seeds. Used to be in your great-granddaddy's day and my great-granddaddy's day and granddaddy's day, they could go plant their field with a crop. They could harvest it. They could keep their seeds until the next season. They could plant those seeds and have a new wonderful crop. But that's against the law now, David. People can go to jail for doing that because now Monsanto owns all those seeds, and it's against the law to try to replant a seed. They've got them programmed so that they only produce for one time anyway. But why would you think? They'll keep people buying more seeds, you know, or keeps people in business. So greed has taken over quite a bit as well. So all of these things, from the meat issue to the genetically modified issue to the soy issue, because there's no pure strains of soy anymore because it goes even through the air and cross-pollination can happen. And, you know, now there's scientific research about how the soy gives off the estrogen and the phytoestrogens, which can feed some cancers. And actually now they're finding such an epidemic, and I'll bet you're seeing this among people you're helping as well. There is an epidemic now of thyroid, hyperthyroid, hypothyroid, Hashimoto's disease, thyroid cancer, and all this stuff going on with the thyroid. And when the thyroid is not working properly and those hormones from that thyroid are not working in the right way, that affects everything within the body. And one of the reasons that the scientists say that this is happening is all of the eating of the soy products. Okay, so at one time I ate a lot of soy because I thought soy, well, that's going to be good. That'll be better. I'm not eating meat, so let me eat the soy burger, you know, or the soy cheese or whatever, the soy protein. Well, that tastes like meat. You know, still that wanting to kind of feed that addiction that I had for the taste of meat, that I was looking for, that if I'm not going to eat it, then let me have something that at least tastes like it a little bit. And that would go into those soy proteins. And I had no idea that eating soy was directly related to fueling breast cancer because I didn't know. But, you know, when we don't know better, we can't do better. But once we learn better, we really ought to do better. I mean, at least I want to try my best. I'm human. I'm not perfect. And, I mean, I get tempted by foods like we all do. And listen, if I go to a birthday party and they have a birthday cake, I have a piece. It is not on my lifestyle plan to be eating birthday cake every day, and I don't. But if I want a piece, I eat it. But you know what I find now, David? I can't really eat a piece of birthday cake. I can take a bite. But the sugar for me, because I don't eat it, is so strong that to me now it's nauseating. Whereas before I would have loved to have had 3 or 4 pieces of birthday cake. My taste have changed, you know?
Right, yeah, totally. I want to share a scripture, you know, in reference to meat that's been kind of, you know, working with my spirit here recently, and it's a scripture in Hosea, okay?
All right.
And it's in Hosea chapter 4. Now, remember earlier I said that the meats today are not the same as they were in biblical times.
Right.
And so we have to use our wisdom, pertaining to this topic. And in the last verse of Hosea chapter 3, it says that here's like a prophecy for the latter times, the latter days. Okay. And all of the evangelists and prophecy teachers of today are saying we're living in that time frame. Okay.
That's
and then
right.
it says in Hosea 4, which it's an unfortunate chapter break. Okay. But in Hosea 4, it talks about, and I'm paraphrasing, talks about by swearing, lying, and killing, stealing. It talks about adultery, blood touching blood, and then it says, therefore the land will mourn, everyone that dwells in the land will languish, and look what it says, with the beasts of the field, with the fowls of the heaven, and the fish of the sea, all shall be taken away. And so what I see, I see like God foreknew bird flu, and
right,
and
swine flu and Asian bird flu, right.
Right. He knew all of this stuff was coming down the pike, and it's like if we just read, generally when you hear a message on this, all you hear is, they use it to talk about, you need to not kill, don't steal, don't lie, right? But they
like
miss
don't
the part
kill
where
another person, not don't kill an animal and eat it, right? Exactly.
Right, but they always miss the part when it says that the land is going to languish, including the animals, and so that scripture's really been working on me lately as to do I even want to promote the eating of animal products? And so if anybody's been following my my videos lately, I do a video every day on my website, a little YouTube video, kind of a health tip. I've kind of been going back and forth on the meat topic. It's like if you're going to eat meat, please make sure it's free range, no hormones, no none of that, and make sure it's in accordance with Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy 14, no pork, no shellfish, none of that stuff we're not supposed to eat. And but I've even gone to the flip side and said, I'm only recommending that if you're choosing to eat that.
Right. Well, I tell people that same thing. I say, I can't control what you eat, only you can. So if you're going to eat an animal, then probably the best one would be maybe like a wild Alaskan salmon every now and then. Probably would be the very best. I said, but I'm not encouraging you to do it. But if you're going to eat animals, you want to eat them as clean as possible. So I hear you loud and clear on that, David. And, good. I'm happy that you're looking at it a little deeper, now as well, because I talk about these things so many times, the swine flu. And what about this, the mad cow disease? Remember that one? Okay,
sure.
The mad cow disease. And listen, remember when Oprah was on television and she said she was never going to eat a hamburger again? Do you remember the real furor that came around that and the big lawsuit and how the cattle industry just so got up in arms?
Right.
About it, because, God will bring things forth for us to look at in all kinds of different ways. So, we're seeing it more and more and more out in the news. But now here's something that maybe people don't realize. A lot of people are very concerned for the environment. I'm one of those people. I believe that we have a responsibility of taking care of our Mother Earth, and that God gave us that responsibility, and that because it has gotten so out of balance, we have so many things now that are going on that have been prophesied. As you mentioned, that there are many people that are saying that this is, before the end of time, and we're seeing more of the turbulence in the weather and the earthquakes and, all of these signs. But now here is something that, there was a movie out that Al Gore did called The Inconvenient Truth, and a lot of people saw that movie. And that movie is all about global climate change and the raising of the global temperature and how it really was causing, the warming was causing all of this. And he talked about things like pollution, talked about things that factories were giving off and, you know, things that they're actually putting out in the water and, you know, all the chemicals, and talked about air conditioners, and he talked about the pollutants that cars give out, and, just went into great depth of all that. But here's the one thing that he did not talk about, which is, interestingly enough, the number one reason for global warming, and that is the deforestation of the globe in order to raise animals to slaughter and eat. And that also the feces that the animals give off, because there's so much of it, because this vast amount of land where trees have been cut down and it's been turned into now for cattle grazing, and now they eliminate, and the pig farms, and they eliminate, and they give off this methane gas. And the methane gas coming off of the excrement from the raising of these animals is far more of it and more damaging than all those other things that they talk about. But guess what? Al Gore is a cattle farmer and involved with the cattle farmers. So that little part of the inconvenient truth didn't actually unfold. And here's another thing that was never mentioned in there, too, is that it takes 2,500 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of feedlot beef. Just 1 pound, like a hamburger meat. 2,500 gallons of water. Okay, now that's because they got to plant stuff for them to eat. They got to water that stuff that they eat. They've got to water them, and that 2,500 gallons goes into only 1 pound. Now, on the opposite side, only 25 gallons of water are needed to grow a pound of wheat. And that's quite interesting when you look at that. So water, now we've been told we got a shortage of water. And in Georgia, you know, when we have had droughts now for quite a while, and there'll be times that they will put out an announcement, you can't water but every other day, or then you can't water at all right now, or you can't water your grass until after 10 at night and, you know, before 10 in the morning, or, you know, there's all kinds of things like we've got to conserve our water. And yet, because of the addiction that people have to eating meat, we're using 2,500 gallons just to make 1 pound. In fact, if your tax dollars and my tax dollars did not subsidize the cost of beef, people would be paying several $100s, you know, $250 of probably a pound or more just to get a pound of meat, because our tax dollars are subsidizing all that water that the cattle farmers have to grow the cattle. And I'd like for us to look beyond just our own physical health, because we're connected to Mother Earth. God gave us all this to, you know, in a dominion that we're supposed to be looking over it. We haven't been doing the best possible optimum job in a lot of ways on that. You know, in a lot of ways. Recycling, you know, what about all the plastic bottles of all the water that people buy in plastic bottles? And all those plastic bottles going out there. I mean, we can look at a lot of different things, not just the, you know, the food, or not just toxins in a particular way, but exactly what is it doing to our Mother Earth. And, you know, there's some wonderful films. They're hard to watch, but they're so important for people to watch, which is the brutalization of animals and how they're being treated and raised. And even if that doesn't get to you, if you're not a person that, you know, with me, when I watch something like that, it just makes my heart hurt. I just feel such compassion and sadness for these poor animals and how they're treated. I mean, it's brutal to watch what they do. And if people would even go to a slaughterhouse and watch the process, they they probably wouldn't want to eat animals again. So I think it's important that we do look and that we not keep turning a blind eye away and say, I don't want to see that kind of thing. I want to eat it, but I don't want to know how it gets to that point of it. We really do need to open our eyes, and we need to pay attention because things are changing. And it isn't, and they've been changing now, and they're changing faster now than ever. So now where are we? Here we are as what we are known as being the richest country in the world, and aren't we blessed? I feel so fortunate to be an American. I love my country. I'm so glad I live in America. And every time I travel out to another country, it just makes me more proud to be an American and realizing that what a gift that it is. But at the same time, we're supposed to be the richest country on the planet. And we say we have something called health care, when in actuality that isn't true. We only have something that really should accurately be called sickness care, not health care. Because our program here is about selling people a lot of drugs, cutting out body parts that get diseased, and just keep on doing it until they die. A lot of people make a lot of money off of that. Greed is set in, and now we have illness has become a multi-zillion-dollar business. So it really is not in the best interest of these people that are making all this money. It's not in their best interest to really want to teach people how to heal and be healthy through using some of the simple laws of God and nature and following them, because it's so simple that a lot of times people just refuse to get it. They're like, it just can't be that easy. They're thinking it's got to be complicated, but it isn't. It's so very simple. So now we rank on about the 5 lowest down there bottom, somewhere down in there with many of the third world countries, second and third world countries, and our health is not as good as some of them. I mean, wow, that can be an eye-opener right there. But if only, I always think of this, I said, if only a health insurance program would pay everyone, for everybody, to take some type of a program like what we teach. And if there were centers that were set up like ours, teaching people all around how to take self-responsibility, how to eat better. If we took out the vending machines from the schools and stopped selling our children a bunch of garbage, if we went into the schools and actually provided healthy, nutritious meals rather than the junk that we provide now, which is hot dogs and hamburgers and French fries and macaroni and cheese and chicken McNuggets and junk. Literally, I've spoken at so many schools, and it's just really sad. The majority of schools are way back on their nutrition. In fact, I spoke at a school that had several thousand students in it. And when they called and asked me if I would come and speak, they wanted me to talk about nutrition. But before I spoke, the principal wanted to meet with me. She was very nice. We met, and she wanted to know what I was going to talk about. So I said, well, I'm going to talk about nutrition and how one of the best ways to be sure that you're getting the really good nutrition that you need is going to be for you to prepare and bring your own lunch to school so that you know. And she screamed out, no, you can't say that. I said, she almost scared me, but the way she reacted to it, I was like, why not? She said, because, she said, we have to serve those meals. Our funding and money, and, we've got to take in so much money from that. And if the students bring their lunch and they're not buying from the school, that would be devastating for us. I said, okay. I said, well, thank you for sharing that. I won't mention that then. Okay, so then I said, I'll talk about what's on your school lunch menu. So the first thing I do is I will encourage them to fill up their plate and eat a lot of salad. Go to the salad bar. And she says, well, we don't have a salad bar. I said, well, then do you have some fresh fruit like apples, bananas? No, we don't have that either. I said, so you don't have anything fresh for them to eat? And she said, well, no, everything that we have is cooked. And I said, well, then I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll go to the next phase. I said, well, then here's what I'll tell them. Then eat the cooked vegetables. They'll be better for you. Eat more cooked vegetables. So what kind of vegetables do you have on your menu? She said, we have macaroni and cheese, we have French fries, we have baked potatoes, we have rice and gravy. I said to her, I thought she was joking at first, and I said to her, no, vegetables. She said to me, those are vegetables. I said, no, ma'am, those are not vegetables. I said, I'm talking about broccoli, green beans, squash, tomatoes, cucumbers, celery, lettuce. What about those? Those are vegetables. You don't have vegetables? And this is what she said to me, children won't eat those things. We have to feed them things they'll eat. I said, then what do they eat? And then what they eat is what we just talked about, hamburgers and French fries and pizza and hot dogs and, all that stuff. And sure, yeah, it tastes good. Of course kids are going to eat that if you put it in front of them. Who wouldn't? What kid wouldn't eat that kind of food? That's what they've grown up with. And a lot of parents are just driving through the fast food and picking up all that garbage. So now we have more childhood diabetes. We have more obesity. We have more cancer in children. We have more Lyme's disease and rheumatoid arthritis. Kids are sicker today than they ever have been, David, in the history of the world. And it doesn't have to be that way. That's sad. Right. It doesn't have to be that way. But it has to start. Really, it needs to be taught. Every parent needs to learn it, and they need to be teaching at home. Every church. If any listeners are out there and they have churches, I will come and speak free. I don't charge, just to educate the churches, because so many of the churches are working to help their people spiritually heal, but they're not focusing on how to take care of the temple that God gave us, which is our responsibility. We're supposed to take care of our temple because that houses our spirit. And listen, we're not our bodies. I mean, everybody gets into thinking sometimes they're their bodies. We're not our bodies. We're spirits. We're spiritual beings. Our body is going to, at some point, we are going to not be here anymore. We're going to leave our body, but we're not going to die. Our spirit is going to go on, but the flesh or the body will fade away. But while we are on the earth, the way our spirit lives here is in the human body, and that's our temple. And we are supposed to take good care of it. I mean, really good care of it. We're not supposed to defile it or put vile stuff in it, and we're not supposed to let mean and hateful things come out of our mouths either. I mean, we're supposed to be living the way God wanted us to take care of our temples, but we've gotten off track in a lot of ways, so we don't take care of the temple. But just a question to ponder is, if you don't take care of your body, your temple, where are you going to live? Where are you going to live? Because you're not the body, it's your spirit, So do you just want, are you trying to kill yourself? Do you just not want to live on the planet anymore? I mean, are you just going to eat yourself into oblivion and diabetes and cancer and heart disease? And are you just going to keep thinking that negative way and let emotions and fear and anger and all that just keep running over and just totally stressed out and everybody just working from paycheck to paycheck and, not taking time for family and relaxation and hobbies and fun and worship and all of those things that really we need as human beings to balance our lives. And we live in a kind of a crazy, crazy time. I mean, I'm glad that I live in this time because I believe it's a very exciting time to live in. At the same time, there's a lot of challenges in living in this time, too. But isn't it beautiful that you and I can have a conversation? We live in a country that's free. We can have a conversation like this, and we can get it out there on YouTube and over the airwaves, and people can listen, and they can then form their own opinions. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. And then people will decide for themselves. Far be it from me to try to make a person think the way I think. That is not my motive at all. My mission is to get people thinking again for themselves. so that they can make their own good decisions. And I just ask anyone that's listening to this that you would take it under consideration. And the next would be the challenge, like the Daniel challenge, is, I hope you'll come. Be with us in Atlanta for 10 or 12 days and do it for yourself so you can see. Because I believe once a person sees it and feels it, because I know what the testimonies are like when people walk out the door. I know what the transformation is like that has happened. And once you feel it and what it really feels like to have put the most optimum nutrition in your body for 10 or 12 days, to have cleansed your body, to have been praying and thinking really good thoughts, and to be working on this emotional and just to be freeing yourself of all that excess baggage. And once you know how it feels, then you always remember, even if you get off track, you'll begin thinking, well, oh, gosh, remember when I went there and I did that and how good I felt? I've got to get back to that again. People have forgotten what it really is like to feel optimal with optimal energy and all of that. Even people who feel good have many times will say to me, I came here actually feeling pretty good. I didn't come here with an illness, but whoa, I had no idea of the energy and how this thing would just have this youthing effect. I mean, people look at me and they're telling me I look different. I'm like, well, you do. And they'll say, well, I can see it myself. I mean, even I see wrinkles, disappearing. I'm thinking, wow, what is happening here? The body really was created to live hundreds of years, but it doesn't do it anymore because of the abuse that we've given. It really is us giving our body abuse is what has caused so many now people, dying under the age of 100, under the age of 50, 30. I get calls every day about young children and young people in their early 20s with far advanced 4-stage pancreatic cancer and, so many things that you think, oh, my goodness. You just think, well, what is it all coming to here? Look at how disease has become so rampant and so far-reaching. And, a disease, when a person has a disease, it doesn't affect just that person. It affects that entire family and really the whole community, around that person. But there's a better way. So I want us to really leave people with a lot of hope and joy and excitement that we can make our changes. If we care about ourselves, we can do it. Don't make it about another person. Like, don't start using excuses. Like, don't say, well, my husband won't do it, so I can't, or my wife won't do it, so I don't want to, or my children won't eat it, so I'm not even going to try it. Don't make any excuses. Just do it and feel for yourself, and then you decide. And you know what? If you want to go back to eating all the things you've been eating after you've experienced what you can really feel like, what really optimum health is really like, then it'll always be there. I mean, it will, unless they outrule it or something. I mean, unless it becomes against the law to go eat at a fast food restaurant, I cannot see that really changing. Unless it becomes against the law to take a prescription drug, I really can't see that they're going away. But that's okay, because what we have is the free will to make a decision, and we can decide not to put it in our body. We can say, I'm not going to eat meat anymore, and I'm just going to see how do I feel. And you know what? I'm not going to take drugs anymore. I'm going to use, we use essential oils. I have a whole line of essential oils that I've had custom mixed just for my students. I buy the pure organic oils, and I have them mixed to the specifications that, and many of them are right in the Bible. They talk about the anointing and the healing with the essential oils. And why don't we do them today? Well, pharmacies can't patent them, and they can't make lots of money off of them. So, they're not going to be telling you about using essential oils. They're going to tell you about all these drugs. But have you noticed how many ads are on the news or on the television now for attorneys that are now saying if you or your loved one took such and such a drug and you had a stroke or a heart attack or they died or you've got paralysis, call us because you might be entitled to money? Do you notice how many